right then. Well, Leo, thank you very much, mate. We've made it. We are, after a little bit of a gap there, we are back into cinema life and everything, and you can be my first returning guest, which I'm very happy about.
Thank you.
So yeah, three amazing films. We'll get onto them in a minute, but as I always like to start these interviews or these podcasts, could you just tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Leo. I'm an industrial designer studying at Loughborough University, and I'm currently on a gap year to do acting. I started with Shakespeare. I just ran shit. I was horrible. I was so bad. There was a scene where I had to cry as like King Alonso because my son is dead. I tried to pull like the worst fit. I was like, I couldn't cry. I couldn't do it. But I did it for 2 years, and I got a lot better. And now decided to gap year to do like acting. But I specialize in like CAD design and animation.
Hmm. Well, there is an obvious question there, which I have to ask. How do we get acting and create? I mean, they're both creative, I understand, but one has very different parameters in industrial design. But how do we go from industrial design to acting? Where was the curiosity there? Where was the through line for you?
Acting was something I always wanted to do for a while. I was just never brave enough to do it. I remember going to like a GCSE drama thing, like a taster session, and I was too scared of getting bullied, because I was at boys' school. I was like, oh, you're like a pussy or something like that. I didn't want to, so I didn't do it. I did one session and I was like, oh, I'm not doing this. But then after like my first year of university, um, it was just horrible, yeah. And I decided, life's too short. I might as well just do the things I want to do. And so I started acting, I started singing, I started doing everything that I wanted to do.
Mm.
And my life pretty much started after my first year of university.
So this actually ties a little bit back into my old podcast of slouching towards masculinity. Do you think not being involved in such a boys' school freed you up a little bit from judgment of others, that you felt more comfortable to be able to explore these other sides of yourself?
Well, I actually realized that you can't escape judgment of others. It was my judgment on myself that made me feel
Mm.
judged by others. I remember there was this one point where lectures just started opening up because it was COVID. So it was like halfway through the year, and I was gonna go for a lecture, and it's a weird story, but I was staring in the mirror for like half an hour. I just hated everything I saw. So I didn't go to the lecture. And I think that was like a big moment for me. I just hated myself, man. But I realized that in order to stop judging myself, I had to force myself to be judged by others. So acting is a really good way to be judged by others.
Ah,
Singing is a really good way to be judged by others. So I kind of just like it's like a root of anger. I force myself to do all this stuff.
it's almost confronting your fears as well, because, like you say, I find that very interesting when people think of what the worst case scenario is, like in terms of self-judgment or judgment, being ruthlessly judged every time you do a certain performance or like do
Yeah.
a certain act, and you literally are. I mean, but I think the other thing as well, I don't know if you agree with this, is that I sort of come to the conclusion a little while ago is that people actually judge us a lot less than we feel they are. Like, people actually, in not a horrible way, care a lot less. It might be that second of judgment, but then they're often thinking about their own lives, and again, a lot of the time being very critical to themselves, and often lash out at others because they're feeling so self-judgmental. Would you agree with that?
That's that's very true. I 100% agree with that. Yeah. Although I do think that first impressions really matter. Like you do
Mm.
sort of get a sense of someone based on first impressions, but we can't really concern ourselves with that. It just is what it is. If someone likes you, they do. If they don't, they don't. It's like whatever.
That's like acting roles as well. If it's meant for you, nothing will stop you getting it. If it's not meant for you, nothing's going to get you to get it.
That's right. That's right. That's
Just
completely
enjoy
right.
it.
You gotta
But
live with that for the whole thing.
do you get any sort of parallels, like during the creative, and like people called it flow state or being in the moment, like when you're creating something industrially, do you get, or designing something, do you get a similar sense of like freedom and otherness and just being in the moment? Do you get that with acting at all, when you're like forgetting about the lines and just being that character? Do you see any parallels there at all?
I would say there are a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. It's like
Mm.
with acting, I'll start with industrial design. You can really just not care about yourself and just go into it, put some headphones on and just like work and work and work and really get into this flow state. But with acting, I can't really do that. I can't really get into this flow, especially when I'm on set. you can't really get I can't really get into this flow state because there's so much going on. You can't really zone out. You have to be zoned in all the time. But with industrial design, I can just zone out and I can just work for 8 hours without realizing it's 8 hours. But with acting, it gets really tiring because you're literally physically straining yourself
Yes.
constantly, focusing on the other person, doing knowing your lines and just thinking about your intentions. And it's like, yeah, you can't really focus on it. Yeah.
It's something that I've had to sort of come to terms with as well. It's like the lighting's not ready, the lighting's not ready, the camera's not ready, the camera's ready now. Go, 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 cry,
Yeah,
cry.
yeah,
You're just
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, literally. Like you're like, okay, are you focusing? And then all of a sudden you forgo and like, oh, hold on, what's
yeah,
going on?
we've got one take.
You
Go
know?
now. Do everything. Remember all the lines perfectly. All like, yeah, I know. Like, I actually found someone the other day. I don't know if you've ever had this or you have a particular way of getting into state, but I realized the actor I was working with did something that I did, and I've not found a lot of people that do it too much. Some people sort of zone out and just stare at a point on the ground. I tend just to completely shut my eyes and focus out on everything. And I realized the other actor was doing the same thing, and I didn't take it personally. But until they said action, they didn't open their eyes, and I was like, "Oh, fair enough. I'm not the only one."
Fair enough. I think I do the first thing that you said, just stare at the floor.
I've said I was going to say when we worked, myself and Leo worked together on a film called Red Strings recently, and you were the zoner, which I quite like. I use a mixture of them, and yeah,
The
it's sort of like
zoner.
it can look like the weirdest thing to someone like walking in on it. It's like someone's making direct eye contact, and the other person's just staring at the floor, just completely blank expression. It looks very
Yeah,
intense,
yeah.
but whatever gets you there at the end of the day, and whatever gets
What
you.
happened here? You know? Yeah.
Right. So enough of chat about that. Let's have a talk about your three films then, two of which I'd never seen. And I really enjoyed actually watching them. One of them was actually a lot of just playful fun, which try and guess which one that was. But would you like to name your three films then, please, Leo?
Yeah, so Grown Ups, Adam Sandler, The Four Brothers, and The Blind Side.
Yes, The Blind Side was the one I've seen. Four Brothers, I hadn't, or Grown Ups, and Grown Ups was actually a real pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
You got
it's
me back
like
into watching comedies again, so I was happy about
really.
that. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's great. That's great to hear.
I was just watching too much depressing stuff, and I was like, "Oh Christ, it is possible to watch cinema and laugh, and it just be quite free and easy, and then just go on the rest of your day rather than having to deal with bleakness."
And yeah, and the thing with Grown Ups is that nothing happens, but I think that that's quite nice.
should should we start off with Grown Ups? Would you like to start with Grown Ups?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with Grown Ups.
All right, then.
Someone's printing something.
Here we go.
There we
Oh,
go.
is that your nose?
No, no, that's my brother printing something.
Okay, then. So the Adam Sandler film, Grown Ups.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, why Grown Ups? We've sort of covered it a little bit already, but why Grown Ups?
I've watched that film over 200 times,
Yeah.
well over 200 times. And there was a point in my GCSE, after my GCSE exams, I watched Grown Ups and I didn't know what to do after I watched Grown Ups. I felt really sad. It's like, oh, I've finished my favorite film now. What do I do? And so I didn't want to watch Grown Ups 2 because I think that film kind of sucks. Um, so I just watched it again. So I watched the same film twice in a row, like back to back. But I think I started watching it when I was a kid, when I was really young. I first discovered it, and it was so like just fun. It was such a fun film to
Yeah.
watch, you know. It's a really happy-go-lucky film. When again, nothing really happens. It's just friends hanging out and in person. And I feel like in my generation, a lot of people hang out online rather than in person. I don't know. That's just the way things are, and I quite like the idea of just friends hanging out in person, no online, nothing. Just chilling, having a good time without a need of phones or technology. I think
Yeah.
that's why it draws me to the film so much.
And there's actually a lot of there's a bit in it. Sorry, spoilers now. You should watch it and
Yeah.
pause the podcast, go and watch it. But the bit with I get really annoyed when anyone talks about highbrow or lowbrow, or people sneer at certain film choices because like they're considered like just it's meaningless comedy or whatever. There's a bit in there that I was really touched by with the phones on strings. The cups on strings, and they were
Oh
talking to
yeah,
each
yeah,
other.
yeah.
Obviously, they ended it with a joke with the one in the toilet, but like, but just kids actually being able to communicate and not being stuck to their phones all the time, not worried about the commercialism or the consumerism, actually having just time together meant so much.
It's just like opening your horizons and just I don't know, especially with my friend groups from high school, very online based, so play a lot of like games online.
Mm.
So it's quite nice to see like friends like hanging out in person and sort of trying to live that sort of lifestyle where you meet up and you're just fine without a phone. You know, you find creative ways to have fun rather than playing games.
And I think Adam Sandler is really good when you watch his work back. I mean, the funny thing about, well, it's not really a funny thing about Adam Sandler, but when Adam Sandler wants to go, like in terms of like acting prowess, Punch Drunk Love, Spaceman, and of course Uncut Gems, the guy is a
Yes.
is a solid, unbelievably solid actor, like incredible actor. But then you ask yourself, why does he make Grown Ups and stuff like and Blink? Oh, sorry, Click. They're not all
Like,
about
yeah.
a great, they're not all about just schmaltzy, easygoing comedy. There's usually a message in all of them about, like you say, spending time with ones you love, being in the moment, remembering his coach who had died, but the lessons that they taught them when they were adolescents and stuff
Yeah.
like that, the
That,
importance of
yeah.
friendship, growing older. And all of these messages are conveyed, but then there is some hilariously funny bits in there as well, and some real like that. I often felt that even though they're all playing characters, some of those jokes they were playing, like oh what sorry the guy who's done MMA before, I've completely forgotten his name, Kevin James, isn't it?
Kevin
Some of the
James.
bits
Yeah,
they
Kevin
were
James.
the jokes they were making about his weight and stuff. I thought they were just
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. So that was ad libbing. They're just doing that to him on set, aren't they? They're just killing him on
I
set.
feel like the whole film, they're not playing characters, they're just doing themselves. They're literally
Yes,
just playing themselves. They're just hanging out.
I think yeah, and you know what? People sort of, again, that could be better. Like, okay, so let's break this down. You get all the people like Rob Schneider's got a job for life with Adam Sandler, but you get your friends on set who you love. They all get paid for it. You get to travel to amazing locations, and you're getting to have fun every day. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
sort of unlock the
exactly.
matrix a little bit there, you know.
You know, fun fact, he actually bought a Tesla for all his friends after that film. So the four other, like, so David Spade, Rob Schneider, Kevin James, and Chris Rock, he bought them all a Tesla after or
Wow.
Maserati. I think it was a Maserati. Yeah,
Yeah, because a lot of the time as well, it's his production company as well, isn't it? So he
yeah,
Adam Sandler, man,
yeah.
he's a smart man. He does well for himself. So
Yeah, but even those like Click, like you said, that's a really sad film. It made me cry at the end because it was
yes,
so good. So these comedy films are really good. They actually make you like hooked in, even though some of them are crap. Like Sandy Wexler, not great. So he does have a reputation for sort of mid films, but these like good films like Big Daddy as well. They all, like you said, have a really good message inside them that really draws you in.
yeah. At the end of the day, I
Yeah,
think people miss the point with comedy a little bit sometimes. I think you they need, like, as much as there's a hero's journey and it has to be struggle in any good comedy, romantic comedy, that it follows the three act structure. There is always a point of sadness or a point of regret or an emotional hook where you're laughing along, but at one point you have to have the laughter ripped away because then it becomes memorable. And like
yeah,
I say, I was watching Grown Ups, and the first 10 minutes I was just giggling away, but then there are points in it about how is he being a good husband? How is he being a good father? Is he frightened that his children just care about how much things cost and where they're seen and whether they're going to Milan? But then they
yeah.
mix that in very nicely with the Arrow game and people catching it. I just think they got the balance really, really well. I think if a comedy is too throwaway and there's nothing serious in it, then it loses its poignancy. But that one, he always seems to get the balance there without it getting schmaltzy either. There's always that level of like, oh, okay, that actually affects me emotionally as well.
Yeah, and talking about a good friend group, he is literally a great example because you see all his friends. He's like taken them with him, you know?
Yes.
He's taken all of them on his journey with him. And I think he did like a comedy thing celebrating his birthday and like he stood up there with all his friends, which is really nice to see. He's evolving with all of his friends and taking them on his journey, which is great to see. And it's so important to in our own lives to have these friendships that we just carry on with going with, you know?
It's so funny. I was actually having this conversation the other day and about people being incredibly driven. And I think being in the entertainment industry, especially now, especially at the moment, you do have to be driven, focused, and consistent, but you do have to have friendships that you value and bring along with you. I always say there's nothing that the worst idea for me would be reaching the top of that mountain and then going, I've made it, and you're there by yourself. Like, and
Yeah,
no
yeah,
one's there to view it. I think you like you say, it's the journey you take and the people and the conversations you have and the friends you have with you. If it's just you're single-minded on achieving success and be like, if you've got no one to share it with, what's the point of doing it?
That's the thing with being driven as well. You see a lot of these, I mean, I see a lot of these YouTube videos of like how to be more productive during the day or how to drive, how to stay motivated. But I feel like with that, you have to sacrifice something. And I think the thing that you
Yes,
sacrifice is your relationships with people. If you
yes.
just constantly a driven person, you kind of just end up spending less time with people and, sacrificing them for your own success. So I think there's a nice balance that you need to have.
Have you
I
have you
I
seen
think I
that
mean,
guy who like used to be in PayPal and now he's spending like something crazy like 2 million a year on being like getting massive longevity and like he's like
oh, Brian Johnson.
Ryan Johnson, that's him, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I was it's funny you make because it just brings like the idea of being with people and stuff because he has done all of these things and he's optimized his life and he eats the same food every day and he goes to sleep at this time and wakes up at exercises at this time. And he's actually on the podcast, he actually sounded incredibly lonely. And he's now trying to reverse engineer the point of it all. Like, okay, you could live to 120, 130, you've succeeded. But if you have created a lifestyle for yourself, as you said, where you've sacrificed everything in terms of relationship, purpose, or meaning or connection to others, you're essentially a vampire. You're living, everyone you
Yeah.
know is going to die and you'll be by yourself going, I made it, but no one cares.
How is he reverse engineering?
Oh, he's doing like I would say go and check him out, but he's sort of like trying to create long story short, he's trying to create an online culture now where I think it's like a weird name like Don't Die, and so he's going for walks with people and introducing like web chats with people and trying to have hangouts during the day. But even then, I'm just thinking, well, his schedule is so restrictive. Like he has to go to bed at this time, he has to wake up this time, his rooms have to be this
Yeah.
temperature, he can't go out in the sunshine for any longer than this. I'm like, is that is it's in high tech prison of his own making.
I think it's a decent example. I mean, I'm pretty young, so I might be waffling out my ass. I don't know, but I think doing it's like a good example of doing less because I feel like a lot of us we tr in order to like reverse engineer something, we start doing more.
Yes.
At least I feel like I start doing more to try and go back on something, but instead you got to just do less. It's like the art. I think it's the art of doing less. It's called. I don't know what book that's from, but yeah, just doing less is interesting concept to me.
Well, I do have to drop a little a comment here to our little pop as well to our mutual one of our mutual acting coaches as well with Michael from
Oh
Inspire Actor
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Studio, where his method of like finding the intent and then having just being able to ad lib and be in the moment and improvisation. It's just two techniques that he uses, but for me, after years and years and years of amassing so many different techniques and ways of getting into character, being in character, actioning, what have you. Anyone who's interested in acting should really go and check it out because again, the reduction, the simplicity of it, where I'll still fall back on some other techniques every now and again. But if I ever feel lost, just having those one or two moments that I've experienced in his classes and his teachings just completely revolutionized my methods
yeah,
and like way of being on set.
yeah. I feel like I was doing acting wrong for a long, long time. Not
Yeah, no,
not
me
to
too.
say there's a certain way to do it. Not to say that it's art, so you can't really say there's a certain way to do it. But I feel like I was worrying too much about doing specific things. Like
Yes.
how should my face look here or how should my face look there, without really focusing on another person. So I think just focusing. I don't know. It's quite It's like you said, revolutionary for me to try and just focus on another person without worrying about anything else.
Yeah.
Just trying to get used to that is quite a challenge, but yeah, just got to get used to it.
It's an interesting way of being. So I was going to ask quickly before we go on to the next one. Grown ups. Do you have a favorite scene at all, or is it a tricky one that?
Um, I would say oh, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. I think probably probably them just sitting on benches and just talking smack to each other.
Yeah.
There's a scene where they're just drinking cans of Coke, just talking smack to each other, or even on the boat when they're just like talking
That's
smack to each other, you know? Yeah,
that was what I think the
probably one
one
of my
on the
favorite
boat really
scenes.
got. Like I say, it's just that there are some good setup scenes like the aforementioned arrow scene and stuff like that. But just
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
it seems like they're just being very relaxed and just really not really being in character. I think they were just trying to like make each other corpse, and I'm like, I'm all about that. It was wonderful.
yeah. But make each other cool. That's funny.
That's the way I
Yeah,
think they really had that going on. So, right, from grown-ups, we're going to go serious one way or another here. Are we going to
yeah.
go to Four Brothers or are we going to go to The Blind Side?
Let's go to Blindside.
Okay, Blindside. The one I had seen for, and Sandra Bullock on her marathon reign of just collecting Oscars like Pac-Man eating power-up pills. Just like she had her groove for a while where like it was like she was the go-to for Hollywood, wasn't she? So I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
why the blind I mean, I can sort of this is a one that really resonates with me as well, but why the blind side for you?
It's a film that me and my brother we watched and we just fell in love with, and we watched it so many times, 7 times, and we always watched it together. And I think the message of the story was really nice as well. It's just really nice to see this guy get taken in by a family and just
Mm.
succeed, you know? And it's just nice to see that care and love for each other. And I think probably the fact that like there's some nostalgia in there that makes me love it so much. Like watching it with my brother as a kid, um, that's probably a big thing. I mean, for grown-ups as well, nostalgia is just uh,
Yeah.
that's probably a driving factor for me for why I love these films so much.
Well, yeah, I agree. You said with the GCSEs, we've grown ups, and it's probably a time when you're feeling quite nervous, it made you happy.
Yeah,
And then the blind side, and I think that's something that, like you mentioned earlier on about like being online, talking, and like being able to go to a cinema or being able to watch a film with someone, links it into you emotionally so much more, and is so important where people just get stuck in streaming services now and just zoning out watching something on the phone and just maybe watching it in very small chunks as opposed to completely giving yourself to it.
yeah, I've got strong opinions about streaming services. We'll I can
Me
get
too.
into that later if you want.
No,
Yeah.
I mean we could talk about that in a little while, yeah. But there was one there was an amazing quote saw the other day on Twitter that or X that blew me away. It's like streaming services need to remember they're just a slightly more convenient version of piracy, and I was like,
True.
that's actually
That's true.
it's really quite true.
That's very true.
But it's like I
Yeah.
think the thing for me, and so I won't go into it, but the streaming is sort of like I like to physically own media. I really affront the fact that you have to pay almost a subscription just to own a film, whereas I'd rather pay for it one off and just be able to lend it to people, physically have it in my hand, and be able to do with it what I want. And also, as well, like I say, just that regular subscription is like it could be a film that you could buy for DVD now for £3. But if you want to watch it online and stay with that subscription model, maybe watch it again and again, you're paying like upwards of £120 a year. So I don't
Yeah.
think it. Sorry, I probably will be employed by streaming services in the future, but I don't think it's a great model.
I think they are great. I think some streaming services are great, especially when they came out, like Netflix and Prime. When they came out, it was really cool
Oh
because you
yeah,
could see all your favorite films, right? But now it's like there's so much content being pumped out constantly that you start to watch something and you just watch the first 10 seconds
yes,
of the trailer and you're like, okay, I know what this film is. I don't want to watch it, or I don't want to watch that. And you end up not watching anything as a result. You just end up scrolling through for
yes,
like half an hour instead of watching something, you know? And as a result, I feel like cinemas are less traveled to now as well
yeah.
because three streaming services sort of replaced them in a bad way.
I agree. I mean, I still go to cinema a great deal. I watched The Fall Guy the other day because there's something
Oh
magical.
yeah, yeah,
It's good, it's really good, but like
yeah,
I think there's something magical about being able to go into a room, the lights go down, and you are there. There is nothing else to do. There is nothing else to check on. You are in that watching that film and nothing else for that time. And I try and do that at home as well. If I'm watching a film, albeit on my screen or whatever at home, the phone goes in the other room, everything gets turned off, and I'm solely watching that for that time.
no, that's very right. I think it's kind of like YouTube, you know. I feel like YouTube is
Mm,
really similar to streaming services because it's just something that is really lighthearted and fun, and you just put on your phone, maybe like when you're having breakfast or something like that. But streaming services you have to really invest into, and if you're just playing it on your phone, I feel like I find it hard to invest into something like a story or something like that
Yeah.
when I'm just sitting there on my phone. But in a cinema, it's like, yeah, okay, that's the only thing I can focus on. So I have to.
And I think as well, it has something to do with the size of the screen as well. I'd love to know if you agree, because it's small, your eyes can take in other things as well. It's not, I mean, it's distracting, but it's almost background noise and background vision. It's not as important. It scares me sometimes how much I see people and they should be present somewhere else. Or the other weird one that I did for a while, admittedly, where I'm watching something on telly or watching a film and at the same time at home looking at stuff on my phone. And it's like, why is my distraction? Why am I being distracted like that? Why can I just not? Why is this needed to be looked at the same time when I should be concentrating on a film?
That's really true. It's like you're watching it while you're distracted, you know?
Yes.
So you're watching it because you're distracted. And it's interesting because I feel like with these streaming services, it's now people have to make a conscious effort to hang out with their friends to go to the cinema.
Yes.
Whereas it shouldn't be that way. It should be like, oh, you want to go hang out with your friends in the cinema. But now you have to make a conscious effort to say, okay, I think it's good for my mental health to go hang out with my friends and go to the cinema. I should do that. Um, rather than it just being a normal thought, you know?
Do you find as well that there's that discussion sometimes as well when you like pretty much what we're doing now, that when you actually get to watch a film with a friend, you get to talk about it afterwards, whereas it almost feels like with streaming services, as you say, there's so much content, it feels like you're playing catch up unless you're like very lucky to have seen the same film like The Fall Guy similarly at the same time. A lot of times it's like, have you seen this? Oh no, oh you've got to watch that. Have you seen this? Oh no, oh you got to watch that. And it's like I end up walking off film sets sometimes with like actually us two films to watch. And I was like, wow, it always feels like there's another, and that's the problem with content as well. I think so much is getting lost because it's such a mass amount of like stuff out there now.
Yeah, and it's like everyone wants to make content now because they've seen how
Yes.
popular it can be. So before it was sort of a select group of people on YouTube especially making like content, but now everyone's doing it because there's short form content that
Mm,
is brain dead. My thing is brain dead. But it's being replaced. It's replacing all like the longer form content, which is really sad to see because you see like where YouTube came from and
yes.
where like Netflix is, and its short form content is winning, which is really sad. I think it shouldn't win.
Do you think up into a time now, almost like everything has its time because it's novel and new? I almost feel like as Marvel at one point now, you couldn't, as Sandra Bullock getting back to the blind side for a time there, was in everything. Marvel was wall to wall, but now it feels like almost apart from Deadpool, Marvel sort of calming down a little bit. And I think when you hit something like TikTok, which is 15 seconds, there has to be a point where, unless it's like subliminal blips of like a second of footage, people will go, actually, we need the longer stories again.
Well, I think it's you sort of see it now where people are becoming a bit conscious, I guess, of like these short form content and how it's bad for you. And there's a lot of videos on YouTube like explaining how the algorithm works and
Yeah.
traps you into watching. So I think people are sort of becoming aware of that. So maybe, I mean, I'm just hoping, but in a couple of years, maybe I think it'll still take a few years for longer form content to be more appreciated. But I think there was a quote of a director who said cinemas are back, like on the rise, which is really nice to hear. I don't
Mm.
know how true that is, but I think that's really nice to hear. Sort of cinemas coming back and just winning again.
I think there is that, like you nailed it there, that cinema is an event. I think streaming sitting at home is still very disposable, whereas when you go to the cinema there's an audience, there is being part of something bigger. I felt it in The Fall Guy the other day, it's not just
Yeah.
watching a film, it's like you hear what other people are saying, you might get some popcorn, you're hanging out with other people, you have a laugh, you maybe have a chat in the foyer, and there's a whole event and level to it that makes it something greater than just like, oh, you are going to see the latest film. I think I do think it makes difference. But and Barbie, and I think it was actually Christopher Nolan that said that quote you said a minute ago, and I
Okay,
think
really okay.
yeah, Barbie and Oppenheimer proved that last year that there is still
Yeah,
a
yeah.
passion for going to go and see.
They were so good.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I got to see a June part one and June part two back to back about a month ago.
Oh wow, okay.
And it was like that. That was ridiculous. That was like June part two started at 12 midnight because it was when you could legally first start showing.
Oh wow.
Cinema was
Okay.
packed. Cinema was packed. We're walking out of that cinema at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's dark outside, the sun isn't even coming up, but everyone was buzzing. And I was like, if people are willing to do that, people are willing to sit there for 6 hours watching two of the longest films back to back, I
Yeah.
think cinema's doing okay.
Cinema's back. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a pretty sick experience. It must have been cool to experience that.
So with the Blind Side, I mean, did you have a particular favorite scene in it at all? Sorry to go back to we're talking about cinema, but
Favorite scene. Um, I'm gonna have to think about that. It's been a while since I watched it.
mm, there doesn't, you
What was
don't
your
have to.
favorite scene?
Sorry.
What was your favorite scene?
I think when he first met the tutor, I really enjoyed that. I just think Kathy Bates has such a wonderful way about her. I just think the way they it's just really the dialogue as well. It's a tricky one. It's not one that lends itself to an individual scene, I would say as well. And because it's a true story as
Yeah,
well, it's just uplifting all the way through. But I just think watching his journey and realizing for the most part it's true to what really happened. I think it's just an incredible story. And it's one of those ones like I say I watched back in the day. I actually went to go and see it in the cinema. Didn't think I was really going to be too into it. It was actually the poster that
yeah,
got me with the little small Sandra Bullock and his massive hench uh, football player, and I was just like, it just worked. It just worked. It's incredible.
yeah. I would say favorite scene is probably Sean and is it Sean? The kid.
Yeah.
The kid and Michael in a car just singing until the crash, Spoilers. But until the car crash.
Well, there you go. You haven't
Yeah.
seen it. There's a car crash coming. See if you can find out when. We will pick up with the final film of That's All Right, with a nice little interesting segue into we just had with streaming versus cinema, but we're going to go to. I really actually enjoyed this one, but maybe not for the main character. Big fan of Garrett Hedlund, but Four Brothers.
Garrett Hedlund.
He's the rock star.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I, I, I,
Yeah, yeah.
I was. It's one of those things where, like, we talk about not being distracted by the phone, and I saw him pop up, and I'm like, oh, what have I seen him in? What have I seen him in? And I fight it to not look at my phone. And eventually, I realised he was in Tron, and he's one of those guys that gets lots of bits in films where he's like a smaller part. But I'm always really impressed by his acting range. I think he's really good. And he's very good in this. I really. But anyway, sorry. Why Four Brothers? I'm telling you why.
I know, like, going on about this, the Rockstar. I mean, I'm fine to spoil it, right? I mean, it's such an old film, but
Yeah.
I found it so sad when he died, especially when I first watched
Yes.
it. I was devastated. I mean, it just goes to show how invested I was into the character, right? It's
Yeah.
just, it was really good writing.
I just think the way as well that sorry, if you've not seen it, go and watch it. Bloody hell, it's old. But like the way they hint at his abuse and what had happened to him before he had got into that household, and he does so much with just a few looks when he's remembering
Yeah,
the mother and stuff, and I'm just like, whoa, he's like he brings so much to that part, and just his fragility and his vulnerability, and like the same as you, when I was watching it, I was glad that I sorry not avoided any spoilers now if you're listening to
yeah.
this, if you haven't seen
It
it.
doesn't
But
matter.
I
Just do it.
avoided all spoilers and I thought it was going to be, oh, he'll end up in hospital and he's the one that's like, go and avenge me. I was like, oh no, they've straight up killed him. I was like,
Yep.
full on.
Yeah, but honestly, I think that's the way it should be with writing.
Yes.
Instead of like telling you exactly what's happened, just allow yourself to work it out. I think a lot of films nowadays they just tell you what's happening and they just tell you what oh just it's just like okay well where's my imagination I can't work anything out, it's not fun anymore. But I think that just a look, like you said, just a subtle look just tells you so much without telling you, and I think that's the way it should be.
Exactly. And don't you think that it's like what we're saying now? It encourages debate, it encourages you to question and pull the film apart. As an
Yeah,
actor, like when you're pulling apart a script and looking for clues about what you make your character ticks, I think as an audience member as well, it's so important not to have it spelled out to you because when you explain exactly what something is and why exactly something happened, then all of your own interpretation gets lost because it can only be that. And I hate that. I hate's a strong word, but I completely agree with what you're saying now.
yeah, and it's interesting because I'm sure actors they put so much work into these films, but ultimately it's up to the network or the direct, well, not really the director. The director doesn't have much say, but the network to have the final edit. And when they get rid of
Yes.
like looks like this, it's like it just gets rid of the work of the actor, you know. It just simplifies everything and it doesn't allow that actor to really play. You know, they get rid of pauses, they cut like all this stuff up, and it's a shame. It's a really big shame, I think.
I completely. I've got to ask you about this as well. So it's all like sometimes as an actor, or just like in a moment, you'll do something in a certain scene, and you're like, that was it. There was something that happened there. There was an exchange, and as you say, when it's taken away and it's captured forever on digital or film or whatever, maybe the director, maybe the editor, maybe the producer just doesn't see that moment, doesn't have the same resonance, and then it gets lost. And
Yeah,
do you ever get that on set where you're like, you've done something, you're like, yeah, that was it, and then you watch the film back and it's not in there at all.
I've done that. Yeah, it's really frustrating. It's really annoying. I often find myself asking them, "Can you change it to do it like this?" But sometimes they can't, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it's cool because I feel like as an actor, you should definitely be directing your own stuff as well if you have a chance, because then you have a
Yes.
say of what to put in. It's a tough job, I admit, but you definitely should try it out. I think all actors should definitely try it out to direct their own films.
Do you feel as well sometimes though that it's good? I think sometimes this is why a director has an editor, and like sometimes a script, the script gets passed off to another script writer for a polish or whatever. Sometimes it is have about that uniformity of vision, and only you can completely bring it to how you want it to bring. But sometimes it's hard to kill your darling, so to speak, and like you could be so immersed in your performance in that scene that maybe something happens in another take where you're like, actually, that scene would be better served without me in it.
Uh, yeah, I find it hard. I did actually direct a short film. It didn't turn out amazing, but it was interesting. It was a fun little thing to do with my friends, and I was editing it, and I found it so tough because I wanted to keep it forever and ever,
Yeah.
and it would have been 10 minutes long if I had done that. But luckily, I sent it off to an editor. He made it like 3 minutes, and I had to say, okay, I'm happy with that. I have to be happy with that. I can't make it 10 minutes long, you know?
I do. I remember listening to a podcast recently with the director Chad Stahelski, the director of John Wick. And he said the first John Wick was actually 2 hours long, like the rest of them ended up being. But he allowed his wife, I believe it's his wife or a friend who is a ballet dancer, to edit it. And she took it from like 2 hours down to something really low, like 87 minutes. And he was like, oh, but we're cutting out all the law, we're cutting out all the explanations why these things happen. And she looked around at him and just said, it's not beautiful. She was only looking at the fight
Um,
scenes as a dance and then minimizing the amount of explanation and just going, it should be about the movement. It's not about the why. It's about the
yeah,
beauty of it. And I was that really, I'm like, wow. And like we almost spoke about it recently with the Inspire Actor technique and Michael Keown and like how it's sometimes not about every action and what it's just about the simplicity and the fluidity of just that singular moment and intent that makes the work flow so much easier.
and allowing it to really take an effect, you know? Because if you drown
Yeah,
it out with a bunch of other stuff, it won't have as much of an impact. And allowing
exactly.
that small thing to have a big impact is cool.
Exactly right. But don't get me wrong, I have been suspected to doing a two shot, and then there's a bit where I've done a reaction or look down, like, oh, I nailed it. And then you watch the film back and they're just filming the back of your head for 2 minutes, and you're like, tremendous.
Yep, solid stuff, you know? Like,
or,
damn it.
or, you, or they go, oh, your mic wasn't turned on, and you're like, brilliant. No, just do
I
it for
was
emotional
actually,
scene again.
yeah, I was watching a YouTube video of an actor talking about auditions, and
Mm.
he had this big audition, and he went in, did sort of the audition in front of the camera, and he drove 6 hours back home. And when he got back home, he got a call saying, "Sorry, the camera wasn't on."
Oh,
And at that point, he said, "No, I'm not. I'm done my job. I'm not going back. If you like my performance, you can hire me. If not, it doesn't matter. I've done. I've done it. I'm done." You know, and just letting it go instead of saying, "Okay, oh damn it, they didn't record. They didn't, it's their fault." You know.
yeah, I think so. That's a really important point, and I like that as well. So when I've done stage as opposed to screen, I've always quite liked the fact that there's always another take, and you can do it again, and finding something new in each take. But also as well, there's something very ephemeral in when you're on stage and it's gone in that moment. But I think it's similar with film. if for whatever reason the focus isn't correct, or they don't mic you up right, or the camera's not turned on, everybody has to be working in collaboration. And if that moment is lost, it's even if you do it exactly the same, there's going to be some subtle difference. It's going to become more performative, or there will be a slight gap in the words or whatever. So something changes. So it really is about being able to capture that moment and just hopefully it's there, you know?
Yeah, just capturing the moment and just allowing them. I think having a trust in the cinematographer and director to know what they're doing
Yeah.
is quite nice. I mean, if they're good at at what they're doing, it's quite nice to sort of believe that they are capturing you to the best of ability.
100%, and that's all you can do at the end of the day. If you feel
Yeah,
like you've brought your best work to it, you have to accept that the director's bringing their best work, the sound, lighting, camera, and then when it gets brought to the editor is doing their best work as well. They see what you've tried to bring to the role, so it's just about sometimes there's a level of control, but also surrendering control and just going, well, what will happen will happen.
yeah. I think just hoping for the best and hoping they are doing it properly. You know?
Exactly. Just giving the best you can and hoping everyone else is as well. So
Yeah, definitely.
back to Four Brothers.
Yeah,
Mark Wahlberg on a massive sort of action tip there, and he seems to really he goes off and does his Oscar things every now and again, but then he has his bread and butter in the action genre. I think this was one of his better ones as well. He's very much playing the Mark Wahlberg style character that he seems to be written into every film, that tough, hard bitten guy, but has the underlying vulnerability and sensitivity as well. Did you
yeah.
have a particular favorite brother in this, or was it like a mixture of it all? What really led you to this film? Why did you pick this one?
I think again, it's probably, I mean, all my favorite films are sort of the connection of people, right? And that's
Yeah.
probably what led me to like this film so much. Just them coming together, standing up for their adoptive mother.
Yes.
Um, just that again, that bond, that connection that you don't really see too often nowadays was really sort of invigorating to watch. Watch
Yeah.
that come together, watch them sort of fight the police, but the police also be on their side. You know, just because of how strong their bond was, the police was on their side, which was really cool to watch. It was a really sort of fresh crime story, in my opinion. It was a really fresh. I haven't seen something like that before. Like, obviously, the action and stuff is similar. Like there's an overarching villain,
Yeah.
like this betrayal and stuff like that. But the bond and the freshness is something that's really cool because I feel like nowadays you get there's a whole I don't know what it is, but it feels like there's something against people bonding together,
Yeah.
especially in films. It's like you have to insult the other person for them to like you, and I just don't get that. It's like why can't you just be friends? Why can't you just like bond together instead of having to destroy it in order to? It's just it's hard to explain, but it's weird watching this sort of brand new idea of bonding on screen.
I think, sorry to maybe put an idea in your head, but I think you're talking about the buddy film, which was very big in the 80s and 90s, like Eddie Murphy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think this one was
probably,
a
yeah,
real big callback to it, where, like you say, there wasn't a real need. They were family, and it moved quite quickly. I'm quite, as much as we talk about streaming and films, I think one of the biggest problems with films at the moment, they seem to everything needs to seem to hit 2 hours plus. And I like the films you chose are all in and out in about 90 minutes. Four Brothers, they set up the fact they are four brothers. It is the title of the film. We didn't need to have a thing where there was a half an hour of they're all against each other and they need to get each other's respect again. No, there's a little bit of doubt with one of them. I'm not going to give a spoiler there, but then ultimately they're all got each other's backs. And I like that. There was a bit of bickering, but it was familial bickering. And it
yeah.
didn't need that whole nother, like you're saying, that whole other gear of like, oh, we hate each other's guts, you know? I just felt, no, you set the plot up, let's get on with the story. We don't need to do this extra level.
Yeah, that was really nice to watch. I guess just jumping into something straight away, and already there's a familiarity. There's like a relationship that already exists, and it sort of leaves you up to imagination, I guess. It's like
Exactly,
you're in the middle of the action. Yeah,
exactly that. And again, exactly what we spoke about a bit earlier on. I'm sure there was a longer take somewhere where they had more flashbacks and they spoke about the history more. But the director trusted in the performances that they looked like brothers. They had a shared history, and that came through in the way. It's sort of very similar, actually, in the way with grown-ups, that you could tell that probably because they really are friends in grown-ups, but they had that relaxed nature with each other. They could knew how far to push each other where it wasn't coming like a full-on violence punch up, but they're pushing each other's buttons quite hard. And
Yeah.
I respected that. It felt like you were what you was watching a real family.
Yeah, definitely. I think those films are kind of lost. It's nice to see, go back and watch these old films, the buddy cop movies, where they're
Mm,
not like you're not you're not introduced to these characters and they're introduced to each other. You're just
yes.
sort of thrown into the mix of it, and it's like they've known each other for years. But I feel even like when the situations are like Rush Hour, for example, you're introduced to the characters, but they have such distinct personalities that don't mix together. But again, they don't really take the piss out of each other. They kind of there's a bit of bickering, but in
Mm,
the end, they sort of end up working together, which is
yes.
really I like that. Instead of just like throwing the other person under the bus and expecting them to like climb up a mountain for you after that, it's like I just don't like that. I don't like that sort of stuff right now.
Do you feel that it's more that, again, we talk about content, that maybe things are getting rushed through a little bit now, so there's not enough time
Yeah,
to like work on the script, work on the performances, because it's just that, okay, you've got we've written the script in 4 weeks, you've got 3 weeks to film it, go, 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 go. And there seems to be tons of money pumped into things, but is it allowed to be edited and like I say, really crafted, or is it just sort of rushed through because of that desperate need to get something new out there?
well, there was a bunch of articles about this actually, especially with the sort of big budget VFX films where
Mm,
animators have no time to animate,
yes.
and they're under so much pressure because there's so much money gone into this film. They have to make it perfect, but there's no time to do it, so they're
Yeah.
rushing through it. And I don't know, maybe some of that has sort of transferred into scripts and acting. I couldn't say, but it does feel that way where everything is sort of very corporate right now,
Mm.
very deadline based, as opposed to very creative based.
And I think that's very telling as well. I'd have to look at that article, but it was again another conversation I was having the other day where you watched when CGI was first beginning to be introduced into films like Terminator 2 or Jurassic Park, and they stand up today. And one of the reasons is why was because there was no time frames on those
Yeah,
VFX being finished. They did the principal photography, then it's something crazy like they had a year to finish off all the visual effects. So when you're watching them, they're like, wow, these look so fresh because they had that time to make sure that everything looked good. And now I think, like you say, it's sort of like, right, okay, this has to be released on because there's so much money tied up in everything now. This has to be released on this date. In fact, you see now with Marvel, they've got release dates before the films even started being, before the script's even been written. And sorry
yeah,
to dog on Marvel here, I don't mean just Marvel, but I think that's where sometimes the independent cinema is winning a little bit because it takes as long as it takes, which is what art
yeah.
is, in my opinion.
Well, also it's in these sort of big budget films, there's less creativity around. I think back in the day, everyone had to be creative because there were such
Yes.
little resources to work with that you had to find a way around it, especially for sort of VFX or animators. Nowadays, I don't think they have any creativity. They just sort of do this, do this, do this, make it like this, make it like this, make it like this. But back in the day, there was a clip I was watching for the original Iron Man film. Well, not the
Mm,
original, but sort of with the red suit, with Tony Stark in the red suit. And
yeah.
the animator had a really big sort of job, big creativity passion. So instead of making his head turn first and then his body, he made his body turn first and then his head. And that just made such a big difference for the character of Iron Man, because it
Mm.
just made him look so much more badass. And there's so much creativity from everyone at those levels. But now it's like the network sort of says, I want it like this, I want it like that, I want it like
Yeah.
this. And there's no creativity left. It's a bunch of numbers and stat crunching.
And yeah, do you feel like I completely like, yeah, that idea of like, okay, we would be lying to know it's not a consumerist industry. It is about making money at the end of the day. It's a return
Yeah,
on
it
the
is.
investment.
It is, yeah.
I understand that, but I do agree with you in a sense that you, there is a point where something gets strip mined where Marvel really the first Iron Man they pumped some money into it, but they didn't know if it was going to succeed or not. But then suddenly things started to become formulaic. There was, and there's only so much you can do the hero's journey, whatever. I understand that, but it almost seemed that certain films producers, they know they've invested this much money in it, they get this much return. If it follows these beats, people will turn up and see it. They'll go, that is nice, but it's nothing really challenging. And I think, do you agree that into a time when you start watching these films, or so many sequels, or so many remakes, or so many of a certain genre, you're like, I've seen this now, and you become mentally quite burnt out, quite drained, because there's nothing new going on.
And it's not exciting. I mean, I think I would say a good example for this is the original Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yes.
Filming that, I mean, going to extras, all the extras were like they signed up and they were so excited to do it. You know, like they were so excited to
Yes.
be immersed in this world. Everyone was so happy to be here, and everyone was so like just thrilled over the top. But now, if you see like extras on like these fantasy projects, they just don't really care. There's no excitement left, you know. Um, and I think that because there's so much content out there, this burnout has really just left people to not being excited anymore. Because it's like, okay, if you want to hang out with your friends, just go watch a video of like Sidemen or Beta Squad online, and
Yeah.
it's just hanging out. You get the same experience. It feels like you're hanging out with your friends, but you're not really. You're kind of watching people hang out with each other. Or if you want to see, if you want to have a thrill, go watch someone jump off a mountain. So it's like
Yeah.
you don't really get a chance to experience this anymore because you experience it online, uh, watching it.
It's an interesting concept. So what do you think the answer is? How do we get, is it, do you think like a building up of independent cinema, independent film again, trying to get people outside to experience it out of their normal states? What do you think the answer is, Leo?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's anything to do with film. That's the thing. I don't think it's anything to because I study quite a lot of human behavior, right? So for my course,
Hmm.
so a lot of my products are or ideas are around people meeting up again and just talking. And I
Yeah.
did like a big presentation on how people, especially when they sort of become an adult around 20 or 18, they stop having fun.
Yeah.
They stop the ability to have fun because they think, oh, it's time to go serious. And so part of that fun is like just goofing around with your mates or something like that. So it's a really interesting thing. I with film, I don't think it's a problem with film. I think it's just people we as we have become. It's more a very online based society. So I think, I mean, maybe just making a conscious effort. There are companies out there though that are making a conscious effort to make people come together again. But I think
Hmm.
it's just time and I don't know really. It's a tough one that I don't know. I don't
It
know
was a
the
tough,
answer.
it was a tough question, but yeah, I do agree. I think it's time and just people. I think after lockdown and stuff, people reconnecting. I know it's been quite a while now, but I still think it had a big effect on people's psyches and just
Yeah,
coming out and connecting again, finding those shared experiences, those shared spaces where people, because I think that's ultimately it. It's the magic of film is not like pretty much what we were talking about earlier on about getting up to the top of the mountain by yourself and going, I made it. You could watch all the films in yourself, but if you've got nothing to share those experience or no one to share those experiences with, ultimately, what's the point? You know, you're
yeah.
having an audience of one.
I mean, you do see it now and then, but like Netflix have introduced like sort of a party feature where
Yeah,
you
so
can watch the
yeah,
same thing. So that's a really good thing. And that's a really good thing to do. And YouTube have also done the same thing where you can watch videos together while in the voice chat or something like that. So it's especially during lockdown, those are really cool features to sort of come together and it's quite nice these like small things that these companies are doing.
I think that yeah, I'm actually going to think about that. That is a really good like you are thinking how like creators are getting that one step ahead and trying to actually what we're talking about, trying to reintroduce it. In one way, it's nice because they're connecting people, but in other ways, it shows that they're aware that people are missing that shared experience. And how can we market it before we lose? Trying to be one step ahead. Well, listen, Leo, mate,
Exactly, yeah.
thank you so much. It's been a great chat. We had a good little conversation about films and around the outside of films as well. But before I leave you, is there anywhere where people can follow you? Do you want people to follow you? Do you want to be left alone?
I don't mind. I don't care. I'm on Instagram,
Yeah,
Leo Anand 64.
I'll stick that in the show notes as well, mate. But
Cool, cool.
yeah, listen, I really appreciate it. A great three films, a great insight into filming, and yeah, I will have to drop this as well. If you want to see me and Leo at each other's throats in a really passive aggressive way, hopefully Red Strings will be out soon as well. The
Yeah, if it's on
film we both starred
16th,
in.
I believe.
Was it out?
Oh, is it the 12th? I think it's the 12th. The 12th?
Ooh, so not long at all now. This will be quite apt. It'll probably be this will be released just after. So yeah, check out Red Strings and you can see
Oh yeah.
me messing around with Leo's desk. Anyway,
Yeah, pretty much.
pulling the desk about. That will mean something if you watch the film. You gotta go and see it. But mate, listen, have a good one. Thank you so much, and yeah, I'll see you again soon.
You too, mate. Have a good one.
Take care, mate. Bye now.